Late at night, deep in the Appalachian Mountains, when the woods fall silent and the wind stops breathing, that's when people say the old stories wake up again. Tonight you'll hear 3 of them, real encounters that should have never happened. Welcome back, everyone. If you're new here, my name is your channel name. And tonight, we're heading into one of the most haunted regions in America, the Appalachian Mountains. These aren't campfire tales. These are real experiences. Before we begin, make sure your lights are low, your headphones are on, and if you enjoy stories like these, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It helps the channel more than you know, and it lets us keep exploring the dark places most people avoid. Well, let's get into tonight's first story, shared by real people who were never the same after what they saw. Story 1. The Whistling Man of Black Hollow Ridge. My name is Daniel, and the story I'm about to tell you happened in the fall of 2016, during my first year working as a wilderness guide in the Appalachian Mountains. My job was simple: lead small tourist groups through approved trails, teach basic survival skills, and keep people from doing anything stupid. But on days when no tourists booked hikes, I was assigned to do solo trail inspections. Basically, walk the marked routes, check for fallen branches, animal tracks, erosion, or anything needing maintenance. I usually enjoyed those quiet days. The mountains felt ancient, untouched, and peaceful. But there was one area, Black Hollow Ridge, that every senior ranger warned the newcomers about. Not in an official meeting, not in the training manual, only in passing, in the kind of voice people use when they aren't sure if they should say something. Stay on the trail there. Don't linger too long near the ridge. If you hear whistling, just walk the other direction. I used to laugh it off. I thought it was just ranger lore, scary stories told to rookies. Every old job has something like that. It was late October, right at that point when the leaves become brittle and the wind starts to sound like it's carrying words. The weather had been clear all morning, but clouds were building over the higher peaks, creeping across the sky like slow-moving bruises. My assignment that day was a routine inspection of the Black Hollow Ridge Loop. Only 3 miles, usually an hour and a half at most. I started the hike just after noon. For the first mile, everything was normal. Birds chirping, squirrels sprinting through the underbrush, the faint smell of cedar everywhere. The kind of environment that makes you forget anything bad could ever happen there. But around the halfway point, the forest went silent. Not gradually, not naturally. It was like someone had pressed a mute button on the world. Every guide knows that silence in the wild is almost always a sign of a predator. But even then it felt wrong. The air felt heavier, colder, as if the shadows between the trees had thickened. I slowed my pace, listening. That was when I heard it. A whistle. So, 2 notes. Almost like someone practicing a tune they barely remembered. My first thought was that a hiker had wandered off trail. So I called out, "Hello? You okay out there?" No reply. Just the same whistle again, a little closer now. I didn't feel fear yet, just caution. I stepped toward the sound, maybe 10 feet off the marked trail, but the moment my boots left dirt and touched wet leaves, something hit me, a sudden, overwhelming sense that I shouldn't be there. Like the forest itself didn't want me stepping deeper. I backed up immediately and returned to the trail. The whistling stopped. I continued walking, a little faster now, telling myself it had to be some hunter or another ranger, someone messing around or unaware of my presence. But deep down, something about the sound bothered me. It didn't have the pitch of a human whistle. It was too thin, too airy, like it came through a hollow reed. I finished the loop without hearing it again. I didn't report anything unusual. I should have, especially outdoor work. But I stopped laughing after what happened to me. 2 weeks later, I was sent back to Black Hollow Ridge for another inspection. I didn't argue. It wasn't unusual for that trail to need multiple checks before winter. But I felt uneasy even before I started. The same silence hit me around the same spot. And then the whistle came again. This time, it didn't sound distant. It sounded like it was following me. Always those same 2 notes, always with the same drawn-out breath. I stopped walking. The forest was watching me. I could feel it. "Who's there?" I called again. For the first time, I got an answer. Not words, not movement, just a response whistle. Same melody, but now only about 20 feet behind me. My entire body went cold. I turned around slowly, expecting to see someone standing in the trees. No one. But the shadows between the trunks looked wrong, longer than they should be, reaching across the forest floor like fingers. I forced myself to keep walking, heart pounding so hard I could hear blood in my ears. Every few seconds, the whistle sounded again. Sometimes behind me, sometimes to my right, sometimes farther away, sometimes closer. Like something drifting through the forest. Not walking, not running, just drifting. When I finally reached the trailhead, the whistling stopped instantly. Not faded, stopped. Like whoever or whatever was making that sound refused to leave the boundary of the trail. That night, I dreamed about it. I dreamed I was back on the ridge. I dreamed I heard the whistle. And then I dreamed I saw the thing making it. A shape, tall, too thin, with a jaw that opened farther than it should. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. I didn't go back to sleep. A week later, a hiker was reported missing near Black Hollow Ridge. Rangers searched for him for 4 days. Dogs picked up a scent but kept circling in the same small patch of woods, confused. It was the same spot I'd heard the whistling from both times. The 4th morning, they found the hiker's backpack. But not the hiker. His phone, wallet, and ID were inside. No signs of an animal attack. No footprints leading away. It was like he had walked into the trees and simply ceased existing. I didn't tell the search team about the whistling. I didn't want to be dismissed as paranoid. But when I got home that night, there was a slip of paper tucked into my cabin door frame. Folded once. No name on it. Inside, written in messy pencil strokes, were 5 words. "You heard it, didn't you?" The next day, I asked the veteran ranger, Old Man Keller, about the note. Keller had been working those mountains for nearly 30 years, and he was the type of guy who looked like he'd been carved out of the forest itself. I expected him to laugh at me. He didn't. Instead, he stared at me for a long time, then said quietly, "You heard the whistling man." I waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. Keller sat me down and told me a story. He said the legend wasn't a legend, that locals had been reporting that sound for more than a century. People who heard it usually described the same thing. A thin figure between the trees, never seen directly, always lingering at the edges of vision. Following, watching, whistling. Some said it mimicked lost voices. Some said it pretended to be wounded. Others said if you followed the sound too far, you wouldn't come back. Keller leaned in closer. "Whatever you do," he said, "don't whistle back." That's why he just shook his head. "That's how it learns you." About a month later, I was assigned one more inspection before the season closed. I begged to switch shifts. My supervisor refused. We were short-staffed. So I went. Rain clouds had swallowed the sky, turning everything dark and wet. The trail was slippery, and the air carried that tense, electric smell that comes before a storm. I was halfway up the ridge when I heard it again. So, right behind me. I froze. The whistle came again, so close this time that I felt the breath in it. I turned around slowly. There was someone standing about 20 feet away. Not drifting, not moving, just standing. Tall, unnaturally tall. Its body was completely still, except for its jaw. It hung open slightly, too wide, too low, and its lips never moved, even as the whistle came from somewhere inside its throat. It didn't blink, didn't step forward, didn't step back, just stared at me through the trees. And then, in an instant, it tilted its head to the side, like it was studying me, like it was learning me. The whistle changed. It mimicked my own voice saying the same 2-note pattern, my exact pitch. That's when I ran. Branches slapped my arms, roots nearly caught my boots, rain blurred my vision. But I didn't stop. The whistling grew louder behind me, echoing between the trees, bouncing from trunk to trunk so I couldn't tell how close it really was. When I broke through the tree line at the trailhead, the whistling stopped, just like before. I collapsed beside my truck, shaking so hard I nearly dropped the keys. I didn't go back to that mountain again. I didn't understand what that meant. Not then. But I quit the wilderness job 2 weeks later. Moved out of the cabin. Started working in town. But even now, years later, sometimes I still hear whistling late at night when I'm walking to my car or taking out the trash. Always the same 2 notes. I tell myself it's just the wind, or a distant bird, or kids messing around. But sometimes it sounds exactly like me. Exactly like my voice. Coming from the tree line across the street. Waiting. Patient. Learning. And I know with a certainty that chills me to the bone. The whistling man remembers me. He always will. Story 2. The Screaming Trail on Beartooth Pass. My name is Alex, and this story happened back in the fall of 2013 when I was still a college sophomore. I've never talked about it online, never posted it anywhere, never given the details to anyone except the friend who was with me that night. But lately, the memory has been creeping back into my dreams, especially whenever I hear long, empty stretches of highway or wind moaning through trees. We were on a road trip across the eastern part of the United States, planning to visit a friend in Kentucky before making our way toward North Carolina. Money was tight, so instead of taking the interstate, we drove along smaller state roads, weaving in and out of the Appalachian foothills. That's how we ended up on Beartooth Pass at almost midnight. If you've never heard of it, it's a twisting mountain road that locals tend to avoid after dark. Tourists don't usually know about it. There are no gas stations for miles, no cell service, and almost no signage. Just forest, cliffs, and the occasional old wooden guardrail that looks like it hasn't been maintained since the 80s. We didn't know any of that at the time. We didn't know about the screamer either. We were deep into the mountains when the GPS suddenly froze. The screen locked up, pixelating slightly before turning completely black. My phone had already lost service nearly half an hour earlier, so we were flying blind. Josh, my friend riding shotgun, leaned forward and tapped the dashboard. "Dude, this whole car is gonna fall apart one day." "We just need it to survive this trip," I said, trying to keep the mood light. But the truth was, I was already uneasy. The road felt too quiet. There were no lights anywhere except the twin beams of my headlights stretching ahead into the dark. The trees on both sides leaned in toward the road, tall and spindly, forming what looked like an endless tunnel of shadows. There wasn't another car in sight. Just us. Just the dark. Just the mountains breathing quietly around us. We turned on the radio for company, but every station was filled with static. Not the normal static you get when you're out of range. This was different. The sound pulsed in intervals, almost like a heartbeat. Josh turned the knob again. Static. Static. Then suddenly, a sharp screech cut through the speakers, so loud I flinched and swerved briefly to the left. "What the hell was that?" Josh said, clutching the dashboard. I shook my head. Interference, maybe. But deep down, I didn't believe that. Something about that sound was too sharp, too organic. It didn't sound like feedback. It sounded like a scream. We drove in tense silence for another mile or so. The road curved up and around the edge of a cliff, nothing but black emptiness beyond the barriers. Josh leaned toward his window, staring out into the woods. "This place is creepy, man," he muttered. "It's just trees." "No," he said. "Listen." I turned off the radio. The moment I did, the silence inside the car felt like a vacuum. Then from out in the woods, a scream. Long, guttural, and so low it vibrated in my chest. The kind of sound something would make if it had a ribcage the size of a truck. I slammed my foot off the gas instinctively. Josh grabbed my arm. "Go, dude. Go." I pressed the gas again, but before the car picked up speed, the scream came again, and this time, it wasn't distant. It was closer. Much closer. The forest seemed to react to it. Birds erupted from the trees, and I swear I saw branches shake, as if something heavy was moving through them. We both stared out the passenger side windows, trying to see where the sound came from. That was when Josh whispered, "Alex, something's out there." I glanced over, and for a split second I saw it too. A shape running between the trees. Too fast for anything on 2 legs. It kept pace with the car even as I accelerated. But the strangest part wasn't the speed. It was the height. The thing's head was at the same level as the top of the car. It wasn't crouched. It wasn't bent. It was moving at full height, weaving around trees like they were nothing. I pressed harder on the gas, but we drove in tense silence for another mile or so. The road curved up and around the edge of a cliff, nothing but black emptiness beyond the barriers. Josh leaned toward his window, staring out into the woods. "This place is creepy, man," he muttered. "It's just trees." "No," he said. "Listen." I turned off the radio. The moment I did, the silence inside the car felt like a vacuum. Then from out in the woods, a scream. Long, guttural, and so low it vibrated in my chest. The kind of sound something would make if it had a ribcage the size of a truck. I slammed my foot off the gas instinctively. Josh grabbed my arm. "Go, dude. Go." I pressed the gas again, but before the car picked up speed, the scream came again, and this time, it wasn't distant. It was closer. Much closer. The forest seemed to react to it. Birds erupted from the trees, and I swear I saw branches shake, as if something heavy was moving through them. We both stared out the passenger side windows, trying to see where the sound came from. That was when Josh whispered, "Alex, something's out there." I glanced over, and for a split second I saw it too. A shape running between the trees. Too fast for anything on two legs. It kept pace with the car even as I accelerated. But the strangest part wasn't the speed. It was the height. The thing's head was at the same level as the top of the car. It wasn't crouched. It wasn't bent. It was moving at full height, weaving around trees like they were nothing. I pressed harder on the gas. The road ahead twisted sharply, forcing me to slow down. I took the turn carefully, tires skidding slightly on gravel. The moment the car decelerated, Josh's voice cracked with panic. "On the right, look." I didn't want to look. Every instinct in my body told me not to. But I did. And standing at the edge of the road, illuminated perfectly by the headlights, was the thing that had been following us. It stepped forward into full view, and I felt my stomach drop. It was tall, easily 7 or 8 feet. Its limbs were long and impossibly thin. Its shoulders were narrow, hunched slightly, but its neck was extended, bending awkwardly forward like it was smelling the air. Its skin was pale, too pale, almost reflective, catching the headlights like polished bone. But the face, the face is the part I'll never forget. It was elongated, stretched vertically as if someone had grabbed both ends and pulled. The jaw hung low and narrow, wider at the bottom than the top, creating a thin, inverted triangle. The eyes were sunken and black. And then it opened its mouth. A scream ripped out of it, so loud it rattled the windshield. It didn't sound like a human scream, and it didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like both at the same time. Multiple tones, layered on top of each other, echoing through the forest as if a choir of dying voices screamed in unison. The forest around us shook. Dust and leaves scattered across the road. The car vibrated. Josh covered his ears, yelling, "Drive, drive, drive, go." I slammed the accelerator so hard the car fishtailed, smoke rising off the tires. The creature didn't rush toward us. It didn't need to. It simply stepped back into the trees, vanishing instantly into the darkness. But the screaming didn't stop. It continued, now coming from all directions, bouncing off every surface, as if the mountain itself was screaming at us. We tore down the mountain road, the car barely staying on course. I kept glancing into the rearview mirror even though I didn't want to. Josh was turned completely around in his seat, staring out the back window. "Holy shit, holy, it's behind us." I looked in the mirror. It was there, running on all fours now, its limbs bending sideways like broken branches. Its spine twisted and snapped as it moved, but somehow it never slowed down. Its pale skin glowed faintly under the moonlight breaking through the clouds. The distance between us closed rapidly. "No, no, no, don't let it get close," Josh shouted. I floored it. The engine roared. The speedometer climbed. But the road curved again, a steep turn hugging the side of the cliff. I couldn't take it at full speed without flying off the mountain. I slammed the brakes, turning hard. As the car slowed, something slammed into the trunk so violently that the whole vehicle jolted forward. Metal crunched. The rear window cracked. Josh screamed. I hit the gas again, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. We sped out of the turn, and for a moment the creature disappeared from view. Then in the mirror, it crawled onto the road behind us, limbs splaying out like a spider, head tilted unnaturally far to the side, following the glow of our taillights. Then the screaming started again. Louder, higher, piercing. I pushed the car to its absolute limit. The engine protested, gears grinding, but we didn't stop, not even as the road narrowed, not even when the forest closed in so tightly that branches scraped the windows like claws. The creature kept pace for what felt like miles. And then, lights. At first, I thought it was another car. But it was a town. Real, warm, human lights shining up ahead. Civilization. I don't think I've ever felt that much relief in my entire life. The moment we crossed the speed limit sign for the town, the screaming cut off instantly. Like someone pressed stop. Josh turned around slowly. It's gone, he whispered. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too hard to even grip the wheel properly. We coasted into the nearest gas station, staggered out of the car, and collapsed against the building. A man inside the convenience store rushed out when he saw us. You boys all right? He asked, looking concerned. Josh pointed at the back of the car. The trunk was dented inward, metal bent like something had grabbed it with enormous strength. The man stared at it quietly for a long moment. Then he said, You drove through Beartooth Pass, didn't you? We nodded. He shook his head slowly. You're lucky, he said. Most folks don't come out after hearing it. Hearing what? I asked, even though a part of me already knew the answer. He looked back at the road leading into the mountains. The screamer, he said softly. Old thing. Been around longer than any of us. Likes the woods. Likes the dark. And it don't like people driving through its territory after midnight. He leaned closer. If you hear something calling from the forest. His eyes narrowed. You don't stop. You don't look. And you sure as hell don't answer. We didn't stay long in that town. We didn't talk much during the rest of the trip. And we sure as hell didn't take any more back roads through the Appalachians. When I returned to campus a week later, I'd almost convinced myself we imagined it. Almost. But then I saw the car again. Deep scratches still covered the trunk. Not claw marks. Not bite marks. Something else. Like long, bony fingers had curled around the metal. I sold that car the next month. It's been years since that night, and I still can't hear certain sounds without flinching. Toadies. Wind tunnels. Even far-off train brakes sometimes trigger that memory. The layered scream, the forest shaking, the thing in the trees running beside us at impossible speed. And if I'm ever driving late at night near mountains, and the radio suddenly cuts into static, I pull over. I turn around. I take another route. Because I know what comes next. And I'm not going back onto Beartooth Pass again. Not after hearing it. Not after seeing how fast it can run. Not after knowing it remembers the sound of our engine. Sometimes, when my house creaks at night, I swear I can still hear that layered voice echo through the darkness, calling from somewhere just beyond the tree line. I still hear you.